Something in my chest that I can't hide. When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you, I'd give it one more try. Turn away and wrestle with my doubts. Oh, I leave them all behind, but don't know how. Bury my head deep within the crowd, but I'm reaching for your hand to pull me out. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? You can see straight through my life. Oh, there's something in my chest that I can't
Technical
hide.
difficulties, I'll be right there.
When feelings get involved, I'm terrified. 'Cause I've been here before and said goodbye. Oh, are you the one when I try to look, I wish I'd find? Oh, how can I love when I've been hurt 100 times? For you, I'd give it one more try.
Okay, here we go. Well, partly here we go. Where the hell are my captions? I don't know. Yes, I know this. They just ran out. No big deal. Bear with me. It wouldn't be a stream, one of my streams, if I didn't have to mess with my Captioner. Alright, that should do it. If I remember to start the captions. There we go. Alright, while we're right here, because I will probably play, I'll go ahead and fix them here. So that we can do both. Alright, so we are going to be finishing, I am going to be finishing Revan tonight. So there are 2 more chapters plus the epilogue, and they look, at least one of them anyway, looks to be a pretty short chapter. So we're going to jump right in on chapter 28. Remember, they had just entered the Emperor's throne room. As Mitra and Scourge battled the guard, Revan charged toward the Emperor. His opponent stood perfectly still, focusing and channeling his power. At the last possible instant, the Emperor unleashed a wave of energy that swept Revan off his feet and sent him flying backward. Revan twisted in midair so that he was able to roll with the impact when he landed. He quickly sprang back to his feet and advanced again, moving more slowly this time. The Emperor stood in the exact same position as before. It was as if he hadn't even moved. Revan began to sense the oppressive presence of the dark side weighing down on him. The Emperor was trying to crush his will, to dominate and enslave his mind as he had before. This time, however, Revan was ready. Instead of charging forward, he opened himself up to the Force, letting both the light and the dark side flow through him like twin rushing rivers. But instead of focusing or channeling the Force, he released it in its purest form. There was a brilliant flash as the air between the 2 combatants lit up. The energy unleashed was powerful enough to send Revan staggering. The Emperor, unprepared and with much of his strength diverted to his effort to dominate Revan's mind, was sent flying backward. He landed in a heap on the floor, and Revan raced toward him. The Emperor rolled over, lifted himself up on one knee, and his hands flew forward as he hurled a bolt of dark side lightning at his enemy. Revan intercepted the bolt with the blade of his lightsaber, though the impact stopped his charge dead in its tracks. The Emperor unleashed 3 more bolts in quick succession. Revan batted the first aside with his lightsaber, ducked the second, then deflected the third back in the direction of its source. It struck the Emperor in the chest, sending him sliding several meters back on the floor. For the first time, the Sith's emotionless veneer cracked as he let out a primal hiss of hate. The sound sent shivers down Revan's spine. The Emperor rose to his feet, his robe smoking and singed where the lightning had struck him. His black eyes flashed red, and he raised both hands high above his head. Revan knew he was gathering his power to unleash a swirling storm of pure dark side energy, just as Nyrus had done. The Jedi quickly calculated his options. Realizing he couldn't close the gap between them quickly enough to stop the assault, he gathered his own energy and spread his hands before him, ready to catch and absorb the Emperor's attack. A dozen bolts of purple lightning arced from the Emperor toward him. Revan tried to draw them in and contain them, but the Emperor was infinitely more powerful than Darth Nyrus had ever been. Revan's body was engulfed in agony as the electricity coursed through his body. His skin began to boil and blister, the flesh of his face melting and sticking to the superheated metal of his mask as the Emperor poured more and more power into him. Through the haze of indescribable pain, he saw T3M4 rushing in to help him. The droid let loose with his flamethrower, bathing the Emperor in fire. At the last instant, the Emperor cocooned himself in the Force and saved himself from being incinerated, breaking his focus on Revan. The Jedi collapsed to the ground, burned but still alive, the hilt of his extinguished lightsaber lying on the floor less than a meter beyond his grasp. Almost too weak to move, Revan managed to raise his head just in time to see the Emperor turn on the brave little astromech. A tremor rippled through the air as the Emperor unleashed the full power of the Force against the defenseless droid. T3 never stood a chance. The little droid exploded into a million pieces, internal circuits and external casing obliterated in a single instant. "No!" Revan screamed from the ground as bits of his friend rained down on him in the form of an unrecognizable shrapnel. He tried to rise, but his injured body refused to respond. Instinctively, he called on the Force to give him strength and heal his wounds. The Emperor was approaching him with calm, purposeful steps. Once he reached Revan's side, he calmly bent down and picked up the Jedi's fallen weapon, igniting the blade. The healing properties of the Force were powerful, but Revan's wounds were severe, and he needed more time to restore his strength. Helpless, he could only stare up at the Emperor as he raised the lightsaber to deliver the killing blow. Even as she called to Scourge to help, Mitra was already sprinting toward the far end of the throne room. Scourge hesitated before joining her, taking a moment to survey the situation. Memories of his vision of their failure still fresh in his mind. What he saw was not good. Revan was being electrocuted, his body spasming uncontrollably as the Emperor blasted him with dark purple lightning. Revan's astromech launched a jet of flame at the Emperor, freeing Revan, who collapsed to the ground. In retaliation, the Emperor disintegrated the offending droid, strode over to where Revan lay, and picked the vanquished Jedi's lightsaber up off the floor. It all happened in the space of only a few seconds. Mitra was moving fast, but she was too far away to stop the Emperor from eviscerating the prone Jedi at his feet. In desperation, she hurled her lightsaber with a wild sidearm throw, guiding it with the Force so that it spiraled end over end to intercept the descending blade, knocking it from the Emperor's grasp and sending it skittering across the floor. Suddenly empty-handed, the Emperor took a quick step back. His attention had been focused solely on Revan. Mitra's trick had caught him by surprise. Scourge realized that if she had aimed at the Emperor instead of the blade, she could have ended his life even as he ended Revan's. But her instincts to save her friend overrode her desire to kill her enemy, and Scourge could only lament the lost opportunity. Mitra was still rushing forward, using the Force to return her lightsaber to her waiting hand. Sensing hesitation and uncertainty in the Emperor as he tried to evaluate the strength and weaknesses of his new foe, Scourge rushed forward to join Mitra and Revan. Mitra had placed herself between the Emperor and Revan, valiantly protecting her wounded friend. As Scourge reached them, Revan managed to stand up again. He reached out with an open palm, and his lightsaber sprang from the floor and into his waiting grasp. The three of them stood side by side, 2 Jedi and a Sith Lord against the Emperor. "I expected better of you, Lord Scourge," the Emperor said. Scourge wondered if he was stalling for time so his guard could break through the sealed door. There wasn't much chance of that, however. By the time they broke into the throne room, the battle would already be decided, one way or the other. "He has seen the depths of your evil," Revan declared. "He stands with us now." "Then he will die with you as well." "You can't defeat all 3 of us," Revan said. "United, we're stronger than even you." "That remains to be seen," the Emperor replied. For Scourge, the universe suddenly seemed frozen in place, as if time itself had stopped. He realized he was at a crux in history. Fate and destiny would be forever altered in the next few moments. The Force washed over him in a wave, and 1,000,000 possible futures flickered through his mind simultaneously. In some, the Emperor was no more. In others, he had transformed the entire galaxy into an empty wasteland. He saw both Revan's triumph and defeat in the throne room. He saw variations of his own life and death played out over and over in every conceivable way, shape, and form. He had to choose, but there was no way to know which was the most likely outcome, or what actions of his would lead to which results. Revan had said visions could guide the Jedi, but for Scourge they brought nothing but confusion. The moment passed and the universe began to move again, though everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. Revan and Mitra stepped forward, ready to initiate the final confrontation. Scourge knew he had to act now. He had to make his choice. In a sudden moment of clarity, he saw the Emperor lying defeated at the feet of a powerful Jedi. But that Jedi was neither Revan nor Mitra, and the Sith Lord knew what he had to do. Instead of advancing with his two companions, Scourge stepped to the side so that he was standing directly behind Mitra. There was a flicker in his consciousness as the universe snapped back to full speed, and he slid the blade of his lightsaber between her shoulders. Mitra gasped and toppled forward, dead before she hit the floor. Revan's head snapped to the side, shock and horror emanating from him even though his mask hid his expression. The distraction gave the Emperor the opportunity he needed, and he unleashed another blast of lightning into the Jedi's chest. Scourge could smell burning flesh as Revan screamed once, then collapsed to the ground unconscious. The Emperor turned to face Scourge, and the Sith Lord dropped to one knee, head bowed in supplication. "Explain yourself," the Emperor said, and Scourge knew if he chose his words poorly, they would be the last he ever spoke. "The Jedi was working with Nyrus," he said, speaking quickly. "He claimed he had once been your servant, but that he had returned to destroy you. I knew I was not strong enough to defeat him myself, so I lured him here to face you." "Why didn't you mention this when you told me about Nyrus's betrayal?" "I didn't know," Scourge lied. "I only found out after the guard razed her stronghold. The Jedi sought me out. They knew I worked for Nyrus. They never suspected that I was the one who had betrayed her. So you led them to me." "I knew they could never defeat you," Scourge said. "So I played along, waiting for my chance to turn on them and prove my loyalty to you once more." "If this is true," the Emperor said, "then you must finish it." Scourge nodded and rose to his feet. He walked over to Revan, bent down and ripped off his helmet. The Jedi's face was badly burned, the outline of his mask indelibly seared into his cheeks and forehead. He was still unconscious, his body in shock from his wounds. Without medical attention, he would die soon anyway. The Sith Lord raised his lightsaber to deliver the coup de grace. He brought his arm down, but it suddenly stopped as if an invisible and impossibly strong hand had seized his wrist. He glanced back at the Emperor in surprise. "Put away your blade. You have passed the test," the Emperor said, "but Revan can still be of use to me." Despite his curiosity, Scourge knew better than to ask how. He couldn't risk anything that might make it appear he was concerned about the Jedi's fate. To sell his lie, he had to make it seem as if everything he had done had been for the most obvious and selfish of reasons. "Twice I have stopped those who sought to defeat you," he said, extinguishing his blade and bowing before the Emperor. "I trust you will remember this when you select the members of the new Dark Council." The Emperor smiled, and Scourge's entire body went cold. "I promise you will be given your just reward." And that's the end of chapter 28, and that takes us right into 29. "The ritual is about to begin," the Emperor intoned. Scourge nodded, though even if he had wanted to refuse, it was far too late now. He was standing in the center of a cylindrical metal platform, roughly 2 meters across. Dozens of wires and IV tubes had been hooked to his body. The wires were connected to several generators arranged in a circle around the platform. The IV tubes ran to clear vats filled with a strange green bubbling liquid. They were still inside the Citadel, but this private chamber was much smaller than the throne room. It was unfurnished, and apart from the Emperor, Scourge, and the infernal machinery he was hooked up to, completely empty. In the wake of Revan's defeat, the Emperor hadn't made him a member of the Dark Council after all. Instead, he had created a new position for Scourge, the Emperor's Wrath. The Emperor had believed his explanation about Revan. As a reward, Scourge was to become his personal enforcer and executioner. taking his orders directly from the Emperor and answering to no one but him. That wasn't the full extent of his reward, however. For his role in exposing Zedrix, Nyrus, and Revan, the Emperor had promised to grant Scourge the gift of eternal life. He would forever serve at the Emperor's side, an honor far greater than even that of being selected for the Dark Council. Scourge had eagerly accepted, knowing his new position would give him both time and opportunity to find another way to stop the Emperor before his madness and hunger consumed the galaxy. "Open yourself to the dark side," the Emperor said, and Scourge felt the air around him begin to swirl with power. Betraying his allies had not altered the inevitable outcome. The Emperor would have won regardless. At least this way, Scourge was still alive to carry on their cause. Revan was still alive too, but he was as good as dead to Scourge. The Emperor was holding him prisoner in a secret facility, and Scourge knew he could never risk trying to find its location. He couldn't do anything that might suggest an ongoing connection between him and Revan. Doing so would expose the truth to the Emperor, making his sacrifice of the Jedi pointless. "Let the spark of eternal life ignite within you," the Emperor called out. Scourge felt a sharp burst of heat in his chest. He gritted his teeth in pain as the heat grew more intense. He felt no guilt or remorse over what he had done. He knew the Jedi would never have chosen this path, of course. They would have felt the price of betrayal was too high. Scourge knew they were wrong. There was no sense in throwing his life away with theirs. Betrayal was the cost of stopping the Emperor, and he alone had been willing to pay it. Revan had been right about one thing, however. The attack had made the Emperor step back from his plans to invade the Republic. Instead of looking beyond the borders of the Sith Empire, he had turned his attention inward, focusing on restoring stability and control over Dromund Kaas and other worlds he ruled. The Dark Council would have to be rebuilt. It was inevitable there would be infighting and high turnover in the first few years as the new members vied for one another to curry favor with the Emperor. And he, in turn, would keep a close eye on the actions of the Council until the plots and schemes returned to a more normal and expected level. It would be several decades, maybe longer, before the Emperor revisited the idea of invading the Republic. In that time, much could happen. Revan had spoken of another champion who would rise. Scourge had seen that champion in his final vision. Blessed with eternal life, Scourge would serve faithfully at the Emperor's side, biding his time as he waited for that champion to emerge from the mists of time. While serving, he would study the Emperor. He would learn everything about him. He would come to understand his strengths and weaknesses so that when the time came, he could help Revan's prophesied champion destroy the Emperor once and for all. "Feel your mortality as it is stripped away." Scourge screamed as invisible claws tore at his insides, seemingly shredding his vital organs. The heat in his chest had spread to the rest of his body. It felt as if his body were made of fire. The agony became unbearable, and he shrieked and collapsed to the floor. "The ritual cannot be undone," the Emperor said, as Scourge writhed, and wept at his feet. Through his torment, Scourge realized with dawning horror that what the Emperor was saying. The ritual was over, but the searing heat and the rending of his insides continued unabated. Focusing his will, he managed to still the convulsions racking his body. He forced himself to his knees, though every moment seemed to amplify the pain. Trembling, he rose to his feet and addressed the Emperor. "How long will this anguish last?" he asked, his jaw clenched. "As time passes, you will learn to accept and endure your suffering," the Emperor answered. "Your mind and body will find ways to deal with the pain. After many months, you will become accustomed enough to it to function in your role as the Emperor's wrath. Eventually, you will simply become numb, unable to feel anything at all." "Why?" Scourge asked, his voice something between a sob and a moan. "Everything has a cost," the Emperor explained. "This is the price of immortality." Revan's cell was as much laboratory as prison. Trapped in a suspended cage of shimmering power, he hovered somewhere between life and death. His paralyzed body was in some kind of stasis, preserved and protected so that even time itself could not touch him, but his consciousness was fully aware. Mitra could sense his suffering. When she had died, she had not become one with the Force. Loyal to the end, her spirit had remained with Revan, an invisible presence hovering just outside his cell. She couldn't speak with him. Whatever arcane Sith sorcery the Emperor had used to bind Revan in his cell made that impossible. She doubted Revan was even aware she was there. Yet even though she couldn't communicate with him, she was able to offer aid and support, her power trickling through the energy barrier to surround him, a lifeline he could cling to in the dark ocean of his imprisonment. As the Emperor fed off him, Mitra was allowing Revan to feed off her. Her sustenance strengthened his resolve whenever he grew weak, refreshing and restoring him so he could continue his never-ending mental war. Because of her, Revan was able to do more than just fight to keep the Emperor at bay. Revan could feel the Emperor feeding on him, drawing on his power to sate his endless hunger. Though the two were physically separated by a dozen parsecs, there was still an unbreakable mental link, fashioned by the Emperor and sustained by the infernal machines powering the cell. Yet the Emperor wanted more than to leech off his fallen adversary's power to sustain his own twisted existence. Revan could feel the enemy inside his head. He could sense the unmistakable darkness of the Emperor sifting through his thoughts and memories, seeking, probing, digging for answers. He wanted information on the Republic and the Jedi. How strong were they? Where were they vulnerable? How much did they know about the Sith and the Emperor himself? He wanted information on Revan. What had happened during his own invasion of the Republic? Why had it failed? How had he freed himself from the Emperor's control? The answers were all there, but Revan would not surrender them easily. Though he was physically helpless, mentally he was strong enough to wage war against the Emperor, guarding and protecting his secrets for however long it might take. And Revan knew something the Emperor did not. The connection between them went both ways. There were brief moments, times when the Emperor was intently focused on something else, when he could subvert this relationship by planting seeds in the Emperor's thoughts. He had to be careful lest his enemy discover what he was doing, but he was able to push and nudge the Emperor's own thoughts and beliefs, subtly manipulating them in ways that could have profound effects. Revan played on the Emperor's caution and patience, constantly pushing them to the forefront of his enemy's mind. He augmented his irrational fear of death. At every opportunity he reinforced the idea that invading the Republic was reckless and dangerous. It was impossible to know what would have happened if Scourge had not betrayed them in the throne room. They might have lost anyway, but they also might have defeated the Emperor, forever freeing the galaxy from the threat of annihilation at the hands of a madman. There was no way to be sure, and no point in dwelling on the past. Revan was certain of one thing, though. For however many centuries his body survived in stasis, he would fight to stop the Emperor from invading the Republic. He clung to his certainty. It gave him hope. He knew there was no chance of escape from his prison. He knew it was inevitable that one day the Emperor would win their endless battle of wills. But if he managed to delay him for 50 years, Bastila might never have to experience the horrors of another galactic war. 100 and his son could live his whole life in an era of peace, never knowing the fear of facing utter annihilation. Whenever his thoughts turned to his wife and son, he tried to reach out to them through the Force, offering comfort and strength from the other side of the galaxy. He didn't know if they ever felt him, but he liked to imagine that they did. Even if they couldn't, just thinking of them gave him strength. Revan was fighting for the future of his wife and child, and it was a fight he did not intend to lose. And that would be the end of chapter 29, and that leaves us just the epilogue. Why is your hair all gray, Risa, the youngest of Bastila's grandchildren, asked. Because I'm an old, old woman, Bastila replied. Is that why you're all wrinkly, too? Her brother Bress asked. Come on, you two, their mother said, scooping them up in her arms. I think it's time for bed. She hustled the kids out of the living room, leaving Bastila alone with her son. I'm glad you came today, Bastila said. It means a lot to me. Vanner reached out to wrap his hand around his mother's fingers and gave her a reassuring squeeze. I know this is a rough time for you, he said. You always get down when your anniversary comes around. Have you been thinking about him? I think about him a lot, she answered. So do I, her son admitted. I wonder what he'd say to me if we ever meet. He'd tell you he was proud of you, Bastila assured him. You don't think he'd be disappointed that I never joined the Jedi Order? Bastila shook her head. You've done too much in your life to have those kinds of regrets, she told him. The Jedi are guardians and protectors of the galaxy, but these past 50 years we've needed so much more. The Republic had to rebuild. We needed leaders to unite us, to help us work together. You saw that need and you filled it. Her son laughed. You sound like my campaign manager. Vote Vanner Shan for Supreme Chancellor. Bastila shook her head. You joke, but if you wanted that post, you could have it. I'll get back to you on that. Besides, she added after a moment's thought, if you were a Jedi, you never could have married Emmis. When we first met, you said she was too young for me, he reminded her. I'm older and wiser now, she said. Aren't we all? They were quiet for a few more minutes before Vanner asked another question. Do you think he's still alive? I don't know, Bastila admitted. If he is, why didn't he come back? On the other hand, there are times when I think I can still sense his presence, like he's reaching out to me from somewhere far away. Vanner smiled but didn't say anything. You think your old mother's going senile, don't you? Sometimes the Force is a little hard to understand. You'd better get used to it, she told him. It's in your blood. I can already sense it in those kids of yours. I guess it skips a generation, Vanner said with a soft laugh. After a few more minutes of silence, he spoke again. It was a question Bastila had expected to hear for many years. Do you ever wish he had stayed with you instead? I miss your father every day of my life, she said, but I never once thought that. Why not? Revan knew there was something out there, something that threatened the Republic. Maybe something that threatened the entire galaxy. He went to stop it, and I know he succeeded. How can you know that? Because you and I are talking about this, she said. We haven't been wiped out by war or turned into refugees. The galaxy hasn't come to some kind of horrific end. Whatever Revan did, he made it possible for you and me to live our lives without fear and hardship, and for that I will always be grateful. She reached out and placed a wrinkled hand on each of her son's cheeks, pulling him in close and kissing him softly on the head. I better go check on Emmis and the kids, he said, standing up. Of course, she said, waving her hand. Go, go. I'll just stay here on the couch and have a little nap. Her son headed off to the guest room in the back, and Bastila closed her eyes, quickly drifting into sleep. As always, she dreamed of Revan. And that is the end of the book. So they just left us hanging. The Emperor and all that crap, and it's done. So, all right. That'll be that for what is going on? That'll be that for this reading. I knew it'd be a fairly short one tonight, but that's that. We will pick up. I went through it once. There's some stuff. I've got there's a short comic coming up from Star Wars Tales number 24, followed by a 3-part mini series of comics. So we'll hit them next time. And then after that, we've got 2 short stories. Followed by 3 comics and a book, but the book kind of comes in between the first and second comic. So I'm probably just going to read the 3 comics and then go back to the book, which I know is a little bit out of sequence, but it'll be a lot easier to do these sessions that way, because I can't put the comics on YouTube. So, yeah, that'll be that. That's where we're headed. So I will see you in the next session, which will be a gaming session. I think I'm getting pretty close to the end of Greedfall, so see you then.
My heart is beat. I know the pieces. One is broken, and one is beat. Because I have seen the part. I have known about the play. I didn't anything to say. Follow your heart. Don't take. If you leave it behind. Someone will bring. I left you my heart. What did you do? You left me all soft. Was my love? Was it love? You have no answers. Don't know without you. How will I survive?